usa y soy saco de a so y saco de out gente chulo cucho caucho chulo gente tigre chulo de out entendimiento ciencia energía fuerza dolor protección salsa.
All these things that I've experienced throughout my life had created belief systems in me that I'm not worthy, I don't deserve love, I'm, being told I'm stupid and whatnot. The true sadness is not that the abuse you've suffered, the bad treatment, all the stupid, horrible things that were said to me. The true sadness is that I believed it. And once I realized that, it was completely released. I was free.
Hello, sweet friends. Welcome back to Unbroken Chain. I'm Maura James. I'm so excited to share this conversation with you today. It was recorded in Mexico City last week with my new friend, Sondra Goodwin, who I met out in New Mexico through another wild woman psychonaut, Bet Williams. We had a wonderful, really intense conversation, which is how Sondra does life. She says she likes really intense experiences, and her approach to the last year has been that embodied. After taking 25 years off any kind of substance use, she has been on a deep dive through indigenous medicines on this journey to heal her soul and her mind and release the limiting belief systems that she feels she's carried with her through her life. And by the end of that conversation out in the desert, she had invited me to come to Mexico with her to meet her shaman, Julio. And that's him. You can hear him singing a prayer of protection at the beginning of the episode. And when someone asks me that, there's no answer except yes, please, of course. So we went and we had a really, really beautiful journey through ayahuasca or yagé and also bufo, which is 5-MeO-DMT, which you smoke. And there are, of course, never perfect words to describe psychedelic transformation. It's just innately beyond words. But Sondra does an incredible job describing the transformation that she's been undergoing and the wisdom that she's in pursuit of through these experiences. And I'm so grateful that she decided to share her journey in the way that she did with me and with all of us. What I most value about Sondra's approach to this is how much she is claiming her experience of the world for herself. She says, your life belongs to you. It's for you. And there's no need to fight for it. And I just love that because I'm so attracted to the signal from women, people of color, queer voices who are all saying, your consciousness is your consciousness. If you feel called to these experiences and medicines and explorations, if you feel called to live a life that looks different than what the quote-unquote mainstream is telling you that it should look like, honor those instincts. These experiences are ready for you if you are ready for them, and the magic and healing on offer from the universe is infinite. Sondra is an artist, storyteller, fantastic photographer, and she inspires the shit out of me. Her readiness to experience life head on knows no bounds. I think you'll really, really dig this. More on the ceremony and the music after the episode if you're curious to learn more. Here she is, Sondra Goodwin. All right, Sondra.
Maura.
I guess maybe we could start by, could you talk a little bit about how this trip, with the mission behind this trip, why we're here in Mexico City together?
Why are we here? What is our mission? Have we discovered our mission yet? I don't know. But we came to Mexico so you could meet Julio and participate in his ceremony, which I think is really amazing, and he's one of the most incredible people I've ever met in my life. And I just wanted to share that with you.
And where did you meet Tayta Julio?
I met him in Panama at a festival called Tribal Gathering.
Could you describe that a little bit? Because that sounds just incredible. I didn't know such a thing could exist in the world.
It was a really amazing location in Panama, right by the ocean, in the jungle forest, where a stream flowed through and ended up in the ocean. And right before the stream flowed into the ocean, there was a deep pool where you could be in the fresh water. So you could go into the ocean and then go into the fresh water. And the festival is 2 weeks, and the first week is all different shamans from all over the world come, and they offer different kinds of ceremonies. And then the second week is just a music week, DJs and dancing, and also different kinds of live bands. And during the first week, there's also a lot of music and live bands. And there was a circus there that performed, and they taught classes, and there was all sorts of different kinds of craft, and they call them talleres, like workshops that you could do with different indigenous people and learn about their traditional crafts and traditions. A man came from a tribe from Guyana, and he brought real rubber from the rubber tree with him. Oh. And he taught a workshop on how to make little figurines with the rubber. It was really amazing. I didn't do any workshops. I was too busy.
Ceremony every night.
Doing ceremonies.
So that's where you met Tayta Julio and you did ayahuasca ceremony for the first time.
Yeah, for the first time. I've been wanting to do it for a long time, maybe 10 or over 10 years. And it wasn't for a lack of opportunity that I hadn't done it, but I hadn't connected with any of the people that I've met that offered this medicine. And during the beginning of the festival, there's an introduction of all the shamans and taitas and different people that offer different kinds of medicines. There's a man from Gabon, Africa, who offered iboga, a Huichol shaman who offered peyote, and a woman who came from Guatemala, and she did a cacao ceremony. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of different kinds of things you could participate in. And when all the shamans were gathered and were introducing themselves and the medicines that they were offering, before any of them started, I saw Tayta Julio. I had no idea who he was or what he offered, but I felt an instantaneous connection to him. And I said to myself, I don't know who this guy is, but I want to be with him. This is my guy. I didn't care what he offered. He could have offered a ceremony of drinking water or swimming lessons. And then he ended up being the guy who offered ayahuasca, yagé, which is what they call it in Colombia. And they call the shamans of Colombia's taitas. And I signed up, and it's been an amazing journey.
I feel like now that I've gotten to know you a little bit, it makes so much sense to me why his approach to medicine and really to life resonates with you so much. But I'd love to hear in your words a little bit sort of what his philosophy means to you.
The more I've gotten to know him, and during the ceremonies, I was already connected to him, like love at first sight, like instantaneous connection. But the more I've listened to what he has to say, the more I feel connected to him, because it resonates with a kind of philosophy that I've already had, or truths that I've been discovering throughout my life. One of the things in the very beginning of the ceremony that he says when he introduces the medicine and when he introduces his way, he says, "En la vida no hay reglas, condiciones ni leyes." In life, there's no rules, conditions, nor laws. And he approaches ceremony with that kind of philosophy, where he doesn't require people to be on a dieta. He doesn't require people to do any certain kinds of things or to not do something, or it's very free. And he says that no soy médico, ni shaman, ni ninguna cosa parecido. I'm not your doctor, I'm not your shaman, I'm nothing like that. I'm just a guide for culture and tradition, that I've come here to share this medicine with you. And everybody is their own doctor, is their own shaman, is their own authority, ultimately, which is something that I've come to realize for myself out of the words that he had spoken, and something that I'd already had a feeling about for a long time.
Is that just part of who you are? Did that come from your spiritual path in the past or your childhood?
I think that's definitely just a part of who I am, and it's something that I think I've developed and become more aware of throughout my life, having really freed myself from a very authoritarian upbringing and belief system, where it was very black and white. There's a right way and there's a wrong way, and the only right way is my way, not mine, but their way. That was kind of the belief system, and I had already been on a path of freeing myself from that kind of indoctrination, that all these ideas that were kind of forced down my throat throughout my life, that were not ideas that I resonated with. And at a very early age, I realized that this is basically all bullshit. Can I say that on here?
Please, yes.
And but it wasn't until I was 16 when I took LSD for the first time that there was a very huge and rapid liberation. It felt like there was an explosion in my mind, and everything just got flung up into the air. And there's so much space between everything. I could see things so clearly, and it wasn't like all of what was inside of me wasn't there afterwards. It kind of floated down and settled back into my mind, but it was like it had been rearranged and put into different places and a different kind of order, and it helped me to make a jump from where I had been to a huge advancement forward. And then it wasn't until that I started drinking yagé with Tata Julio that I really started to develop this idea, or free myself from this belief system, or really articulate that belief system of authority. That in our culture we have different kinds of belief systems that we don't even recognize as belief systems. We tend to think of belief systems as being religious or spiritual, but there's many kinds of belief systems that we have, like life's a bitch is one, or if you don't work really, really hard, you don't deserve it is another. Things like that. And another belief system that many people have is that we are not our own authority, that the authority is always a source that's outside of ourselves. And through these ceremonies with Tata Julio and the way he articulates what the medicine is about, and that he is not an authority in this, that we are our own authority, even though he didn't use those same words, I realized that I am my own authority, and that's what I've been fighting against all my life, is all these outside forces forcing their views and belief systems onto me, claiming that they are the authority of this, of whatever it may be, of spirituality or of education or of knowledge, or even I go to the doctor, and now I've become my own doctor. I'm my own authority. I still consult doctors, but I consult them as experts, that I'm not an expert in medicine, but I'm my own authority about my own body and what I know is right for me and what feels right. And I became a vegetarian when I was 4 years old. It was my decision. I didn't even know the word for vegetarianism. I just realized that meat came from an animal and that the animal had to die. And I didn't want to kill the animals anymore. And I said that to my mom, and she said she's not going to cook especially for me. And that was just fine. I just ate whatever wasn't meat. We didn't grow up with a lot of money nor a sophisticated cuisine. And the only fish I'd ever had was fish sticks. When I was 5 years old, I realized that fish sticks were made from the body of the fish, which was an animal that lived in the water, and I stopped eating fish sticks. And I became my own authority on what was right for me. And 44 years later, I'm still a vegetarian. I have never, ever gone back. I've never doubted it. It's just, it was right for me. That decision was right for me. But I'm not a moral vegetarian. It's not for me to tell everybody else what's right from wrong. This decision was the right one for me. But what somebody else is doing and how they're eating, whether they eat meat or fish or whatever their dietary choices or restrictions may be, that's a decision that they have to make for themselves, what feels right for them and their body and what makes them feel good. And I realized this when I had my first vegetable garden. I had been more of a moralist before then, and when I was a teenager, I realized that leather came from the animals and it was their skin and they had to die. And I stopped wearing leather and I only wore man-made materials. When I was maybe around 8 or 9 years old, I didn't know what leather was and I couldn't wrap my head around it. I'd seen a sheep sheared and I thought that leather was something like that. You just take a layer and the animal gets up and runs away. And I had asked my mom about it and she told me she didn't really know, but now I think she just refused to tell me that the leather is actually the animal. You have to kill it to peel the skin off. And when I had my first vegetable garden, I realized I was ripping out carrots to thin the rows, and I was ripping out weeds, and I was throwing them on the compost pile, essentially killing them. And who am I to make a judgment about what is okay to kill and what is not okay? What's the difference between a carrot and a cow? It's all life, and all life is sacred. That's really the only thing that's sacred. I mean, there's nothing else that's sacred. There's not one building in the village, one man in the building, none of that. The only thing is life. That's what we're here for, to experience. And the more I thought about that, I realized that ancient question that people have been pondering for eons before the Greeks, what's the meaning of life? And I realized that there is no meaning for life. There is no meaning. The whole point why we're here is just to live. That's it. We've come here to experience life. All that life is. Us, the life that beats inside of us, the life that beats inside of others, the life that is all around us. Meaning is created for each person individually. And each individual person creates their own meaning in their life, throughout their life, and that meaning may change. Whatever they find meaningful, that's what they pursue. And that's what life is about. Life is just about joy. We've come here to play. Planet Earth is a huge playground, and life is just about joy.
You're going to make me cry. It's beautiful.
Life is about living. That's it. The only reason we're here is to experience life. That is the point. And life is for living. And the question is not the meaning of life, but how do you want to live? That's the question. No philosopher, no religion, no authority can give you the answer to that question, because that is individual to each person. what gives you meaning in your life. That's going to be different for you, and that's going to be different for me. And there is nobody who should be the authority. No priest, no shaman, no philosopher, nobody who should tell you how to live your life. What is the meaning? That is up to every single person. Through vegetarianism, through having a garden, I've connected with life, with nature, with growing things. That gives me meaning in my life. But that might not be your thing.
Have psychedelics been a part of that? Because you've kind of been on this journey this year specifically to rediscover psychedelics, it seems like. Was that an answer to feeling disconnected from that meaning of life? Is this a new quest, or has this been something that you've been working on for a long time?
I think it's something I've been working on my whole entire life. But when I stopped doing drugs when I was maybe 21 or 22 years old, and along with that, LSD and psychedelics, and
Why did you stop?
I stopped because it was no longer adding to my life, it was taking away. Life is really simple arithmetics. Is it a plus or is it a minus? Is it adding something to your life or is it taking something away? And it had added a lot to my life as a teenager. I think it saved my life, but then it started to take over my life and it was taking away. So I stopped. And a year ago, a friend of mine gave me a hit of LSD that she said was really, really clean and really visual and really beautiful. And I took it the night of the man burn at Burning Man. And I had timed it so I would peak during the burn. And everything went according to plan. Their timing and my timing ended up coinciding perfectly. And I was having a really amazing experience when a man ran into the fire to kill himself. And at first, I thought it was part of the show. I thought it was like a game. I thought it was this play. There's a lot of fire dancers around the fire. And the people from my camp that I was with, they said, no, this isn't part of the show. This isn't the game. This man ran into the fire to kill himself. And the firefighters ran after him to get him out, and the building collapsed on top of him. And the firefighters ran out, and he was trapped underneath there. And once it was safe to go back in, they went back in, and they picked him up, and they tried to carry him out, but they kept dropping him. I don't know if this is true, but in my altered state, I thought that he was so burned that his hand was falling, like just breaking off, like a burned cinder. And they were dropping him, and then they'd pick up his arm, and then his arm would fall up, and they'd drop him. But perhaps it was just slippery, or they're wearing a lot of gear, gloves, and things, and they couldn't get a good grip. Whatever the reality of it was, they kept dropping him. And everything started to go really dark. And all the sound cars, the mutant vehicles that surround the man, it was like instantaneously, unanimously, all of them dropped their, not just the level of their music, the volume, but also the sound, or like to a lower, much lower and slower beat. And there was a really, really somber feeling that started to go around. And people were standing up, and people were hugging each other, and people were just horrified. And then the ambulance came and took the man away. And the people from my camp left to just go back to camp. They were so disturbed. And I decided at that point I had a choice, that I could either go really dark or I could stay in the light. That this story, that this man ran into the fire to kill himself, had nothing to do with me. That it was unfortunate that it coincided with my experience, and that he chose to influence everybody else through his experience. And I had made this furry coat for myself, and I put it on the ground, and I stood on it like an island. And it was my island of safety. And my feet were on the coat, and I started dancing without lifting my feet up at all, but moving my body as far to any side, down and back, and without falling over. And I was moving my arms. These movements came through me. It felt like some kind of like ancient goddess, like with many arms just moving. And I just stayed there on my island, moving, and I went back to the light, to this really beautiful space. And people kept passing by, and people said hello, or some people just passed by, some people looked. And this team of Chinese, I guess they had a lot of cameras, they were maybe making a documentary or something, came by, and one of them hugged me, and I was very surprised because the Chinese are not huggers. It's not part of their tradition. And then a woman came by on her trike, and in the back of her trike, she had all these different kinds of ponies on sticks, like unicorns and different little ponies and horses. And she introduced me to them. And each one of them had a name, and they were like, each one was like their own magical creature. And yeah, I was on LSD, but it was really real. Like she was dressed in this beautiful costume, and she was like a little bit older, middle-aged woman, like maybe 55, 60, but she was so beautiful, and just all these people in their costumes and in their beautiful self-expression coming through and seeing that. And then this man came through, and he stopped and he started talking to me, and then he said, "I want to show you something." And he pulled out these glasses, and he said, "Put these on." And I put them on, and every point of light turned into a smiley face. I guess they were like trick party glasses. And he said, "Look around you." And I looked around at the whole circle of cars and lights and people around the burn. And he said, "Do you understand now? The circle of love, the love is all around you." And then he took the glasses back, and then he left and went on his way. And then throughout the night, I went from art car to different art car and I met mermaids and other magical creatures. And for the sunrise, I ended up on this mutant vehicle that turns out that they're called the Smile High Club, and they're the ones who make those glasses. And so it's like the whole night came all around. After that experience, I realized that I felt so much joy, and it was something that I hadn't felt for a really long time. I'd been working so hard, and I think I'd really forgotten who I am, and I'd forgotten to play. And I had forgotten the joy that we're here for, to feel just the wonder of life and this planet, and that it's possible, and that we're here in the expanse that is the universe that goes on forever, which is a concept I can't even understand. And when I try to think about it, I just drive myself crazy that I have to force myself to stop thinking about it. And that's when I realized that psychedelics can have a really powerful transformational, effect or what's the word? Like, could be a really powerful, like, transformational experience for me to go back to really, like, who I am, as opposed to all the shit and layers that I've accumulated throughout my life. And when a friend of mine who's a psychologist who was working at the Tribal Gathering Festival told me that she was going there to work and that they were offering a medicine called bufo alvarius, the Sonoran desert toad. And the minute I heard about it, I knew that that was for me. And so I signed up to go to a tribal gathering, and that's where my journey to dive deeply into psychedelics started.
Wow. Would you talk a little bit about what your experience was in those ceremonies, how that medicine did start to work on your heart?
Yeah, so at a tribal gathering, the first ceremony I did was a peyote ceremony with the Huichol shaman from Mexico. And the instructions for that had been that there wasn't really any restrictions. We could eat beforehand or whatever. And I made the mistake of eating a big meal beforehand, which now I realize that if I were to do that ceremony again, I would eat a very light meal, because I think it prevented the medicine from really being absorbed, and I didn't have any effects. So I was in the ceremony, in the circle, and I didn't feel anything. And we took what's called guacamole, they call it. And I think the way they make it is they dehydrate the peyote again, and they make a kind of paste. And they give you a spoonful right here. What's this place called on your...
I'm not sure, between your thumb and your forefinger.
Yeah, and they put it right there on you, and then you just eat it with your mouth. From your hand with your mouth. Like they have a big bowl and they just put it on with a spoon, and they go around and everybody gets a spoonful, and then the shaman sings, and then their tradition is that as every person in the circle also goes around and sings something, some kind of sacred songs. I don't come from a tradition of sacred songs except for Christmas carols. And so I didn't really know what to sing. I'd made up this song some years back, just this tiny little song came to me, so I sang that. And then they went around 4 times. The first time I think I didn't sing a song. And then the second time I got my courage up to sing that song. And then the third time I ended up vomiting. And it wasn't until I vomited that I started to connect with the medicine, and I started to feel like a little bit of an opening inside of me. At first, what I perceived is that I heard the trees snoring in the forest. And the more I listened, some trees were sleeping and some trees were awake, and they were all breathing, and the whole universe was breathing together. And I started to breathe in sync with the trees, in and out. And then they taught me this song. And then so the next time around, I sang that song. And that's when I started to feel connected. But the whole entire experience was very mild. There wasn't any visions. There was no hallucinations. I didn't see any patterns. And it was just felt kind of like a little bit of like an opening. And then that was from Sunday to Monday. Then Monday, I smoked bufo. And Tuesday to Wednesday, I did my first yagé ceremony with Tantay Julio, and I did 4 of those in a row, and I smoked bufo 2 times again. And now there's some construction noise.
Mexico, here we go.
I can go into all the specific details of the ceremonies, but to kind of make a long story short, something really important happened. I saw my friend, the psychologist. She said to me, "Hey, where have you been? I've really missed you. I haven't seen you. What's going on?" And I jokingly said to her, "I'm adhering to a very strict drug regimen. I don't have time to socialize." And this hippie chick overheard me. She was about 8 or 10 feet away, and she came over and she said to me, "Here we don't take drugs. They're called medicines." And she just walked away. That's it. She didn't come for a conversation. She just came to judge me and reprimand me about the words that I was using in a joking manner with my friend. And I think in the past, if I hadn't been taking these medicines and really hadn't had this kind of connection to myself and this heart opening, I would have been offended, or I would have said something back to her. But instead, I ended up thinking about it, and I thought, well, what is a drug? What is a medicine? What's the difference? And what I realized was that a drug is a free ride, and a medicine requests an active participation. And religion can be a drug, television can be a drug, anything where you just take something and you just check out. You just want to check out, and you don't do anything, and the thing just does it for you. Like the religion just does it for you. They're the authority. They tell you this is the belief system. You accept it with blind faith, and you don't question it. You don't veer from it. That's how it is. And then you just follow it blindly. That's a drug. Television is a drug. You just watch a movie and you just want to check out. You drink alcohol and you just want to forget about everything. Sometimes we need a drug. You have a really hard day, you come home, you just need to relax and forget about everything. And sometimes just having a drink or two is a really great way of doing that. There are other tools and methods. And again, it's not for me to say what works for you. You are your own authority. What works for you? And maybe sometimes having a drink works. Another time, maybe you do some meditation. Some other time, you go to the gym. All of those, you are your own authority. That is for you to decide what works for you in that moment. And maybe what has worked in the past is not going to work for you again in a different situation. And a medicine requires or requests an active participation. And especially a medicine like yagé, because it's much more difficult physically, because you end up purging, or you have diarrhea, or you go through a difficult physical experience. It really requires your attention. You can't just take something and go on a free ride, like with LSD often, or other things which are more gentle on your physical body. So it forces you to look at all of those things about yourself that you're experiencing. And the only thing I was afraid of drinking ayahuasca was the vomiting. I felt really embarrassed. I didn't want to vomit in front of other people. I thought it was humiliating and really vulnerable. But I wasn't afraid of any heavy psychological things coming up or visions or anything scary, or I had no fear of that. And as I've been experiencing it, I now am no longer afraid of the vomiting or embarrassed about it. I actually enjoy the vomiting, as strange as that may sound. And it really, this purging feels so good. And I try to be aware of what I'm thinking about and what I'm feeling in the exact moment as that comes up. And then just through my awareness, take all that's happening inside of me and release it along with the vomit. And the tradition that they have in Colombia, which I think is really beautiful, that you don't vomit in the circle, that you get up and you go and you give it to a tree. When they're doing it in the forest, there would be an ayahuasca vine growing, and so you go and you give it back to the vine. That's the true tradition of that. So that's what I realized from being judged by this hippie chick. And then I realized that she really was offering me a lesson of something that I could learn. I have a choice. I could either be really offended and pick a fight with her, or I can just think about it and it's like, well, what does this mean? A drug or a medicine? And so she really offered me a very helpful lesson.
That sounds like a transformation, too, in your relationship to judgment, because it's something we've talked about a lot. I think both of us have had journeys on that from our childhood and our growing up years of just how we respond to meeting that kind of judgment in the world entirely.
Yeah, and there was another woman, an Austrian woman that I met after the last ceremony where I had a very powerful experience in the forest. I'll tell you about in a second. It was the evening, and I was hanging out with some Colombian friends I'd met at the festival. And this Austrian woman that I had not met before came, and she joined our little circle, and she started to make small talk with me and, what have you done here and what have you done? And she told me she'd done an iboga ceremony, and that was the only thing that she had done. And she asked me, and I told her that I'd done peyote, then I did a bufo, then I did 4 nights in a row of yagé ceremonies, and I did 2 more bufo ceremonies during the day. And she was shocked, and she called out, she was like, that is too much. And I was in this incredibly open place, and I just said to her, I hear that might be too much for you, but for me it was actually just perfect. And she was like, no, that can't be, like, nobody can process that much, that's impossible. So instead of arguing with her and trying to convince her and trying to show her the kind of person that I was, something I might have done in the past, I just realized, like, she has no idea who I am. She can't see me. She can't even hear me. There's nothing I can say to convince her, and everything that she's saying has nothing to do with me. This is all about her. I felt really this incredible heart opening, and I just sat there, and I felt like I was just holding space for her to express herself and to her fears of, like, doing too much or getting this out, or what's right from wrong. And again, who is she? Is she some kind of authority on me to tell me what's too much for me? Again, like, people don't even realize these belief systems about the kind of authority that they have, or that we have, and that we place on others. And that morning, when I was in the forest after the last ceremony of yagé, I had brought my hammock, and I hung it up between 2 trees, and I just stayed in the forest. Everybody else, was hugging and chatting and eating, and I just wasn't ready yet. I wasn't eating anything. I was just drinking water. I brought water with me. I brought my pocket knife. I brought a papaya. And I just laid in my hammock. And slowly everybody left, and I was left by myself in the forest, just lying in my hammock, drinking water, and listening to the ocean and the trees, the leaves in the breeze, and the sunlight shining through, and the speckled pattern of light and shadow on the ground. It was so beautiful, and just breathing. When during that ceremony in the night, a sadness had come up, and I didn't want to feel it. I was like, I don't want to feel this. I want something beautiful and happy in the ceremony, and I banished it. And then in the morning, it came back up. And so I was like, okay, it's here again. It must be something important. Let's look at this. What is this? And as this sadness swept over me, wave after wave after wave, it got to a point where it was so strong that, when you cry, and you're crying so hard that your chest is shaking and your breath is being forced in and out through small kind of spurts, because I think your chest is so tight and all your muscles are contracting, and it kind of goes like that kind of sound when you're crying. And so that didn't feel right to me. It felt like it was too, like, staccato, like in classical music when you have that really fast, that staccato. And so I concentrated just on my breathing, and to breathe really, really deeply in and out through each wave of the sadness that washed over me. And sometimes I just couldn't help but have my breath be like little stops and starts going in and out. And I just breathed, and tears were streaming down my eyes. And this went on for hours. And I kept thinking, like, what is this connected to? Why is this sadness coming through me? Is it a memory? Is it a traumatic experience I had? And I couldn't connect it to any memory, to any experience, to nothing. It was just inside of me, and it just wanted to be released. And so I just breathed through it, and at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, this voice started to speak to me in my mind. And because all of this was happening to me in Spanish, Tita Julio doesn't speak English, this voice started to come through me, and it was speaking to me in Spanish. And what it said was that la verdadera tristeza no es el abuso que sufriste, no es que te han pegado, no es que te han dado malas cosas, no han dicho tonterías. La verdadera tristeza es que tú lo creías. Which means that the true sadness is not that the abuse you've suffered, the bad treatment, all the stupid, horrible things that were said to me. The true sadness is that I believed it. And once I realized that, it was completely released. I was free. All these things that I've experienced throughout my life had created belief systems in me that I'm not worthy, I don't deserve love, I'm, being told I'm stupid and whatnot. Has nothing to do with me. Again, this is about these other people. This is about their belief systems. This is about how they grew up. This is what they believe in their lives. So what they believe, they try to teach me. And the sad thing is that I believed it. What they taught me, I believed. And that is the true sadness throughout my life. That has affected me my whole entire life. And at that point, all that sadness, everything was done. It was released, and I was free. Not that I'm completely free from those belief systems that were ingrained in me so deeply. They still sometimes come up, but nothing like before. And when that Austrian woman was judging me, I was in that space, and I felt this happened during the bufo ceremony, when the shaman touched me right here, right in the middle of my chest. I felt this hole open up. And then during the last ayahuasca ceremony, I felt that open even more, and I felt this huge hole right here in my, the center of my chest. And I'll tell you something else, which is kind of vulnerable to tell, but I also felt like a hole in my vagina. That was really open. So it was between my heart and my vagina, there was this connection. I mean, the vagina is an opening into the body anyway, but it just felt energetically, or just felt really open, really big. I don't know how to describe it. Almost like it was just sucking up the energy of the earth. And so when that Austrian woman was judging me, I just sat there and I just listened to her, and it did not affect me in any way at all. And I think that that's the space we are searching to be in the world, where we can pass through the world and interact with other people and all the shit that comes towards us, but know that it really has nothing to do with us. And something that happened during the ceremonies that was really hard for me, because it's really hard for me to enter really deep into myself and to surrender and to just be in the process of what's happening. So oftentimes I'm purging a lot, I'm vomiting, I have diarrhea, my body hurts, I feel incredibly nauseous, or I feel incredibly weak, but I don't have a lot of other kinds of experiences like visions or deep psychological processes. It's very physical experience for me, and not a very pleasant physical experience. I don't really why I go back. I guess I'm the eternal optimist. I keep thinking like and hoping maybe one day one ceremony, this really incredible thing will happen and I will have a vision. And it didn't happen. It was like, well, next time, yes, it can still happen. That's what they say about gardeners. Gardeners are the eternal optimists because there's so much failure in gardening because you grow something, then a bug comes along and eats it, and then the hailstorm comes and destroys it, and then the frost comes and freezes it. And there's all these things that constantly happen in nature that I don't have any control over. And I'm just trying to grow this beautiful little plant. That's all I can do is I just give it the best conditions, the best water, every nutrients, everything that I can, and then I just nurture it to grow, and then just everything happens in life that happens, or everything happens in nature that happens. I think that's really what having children is all about. We're not there to teach them anything. We're just there to give them the best possible conditions that we have available to us, and nurture them to grow into the best possible person that they can be. And whatever happens is going to happen along the way. And ultimately, it's for them to make their own choices for their own life. So,
I want to ask you about something you said about surrender, because I love the distinction you made between medicine and drugs. And yesterday when we were in bufo ceremony with Ocelot, the shaman that you know here, I was really struck by the realization that surrender, which seems to be something passive, is actually a very active choice that you can have, and that medicine, especially I think bufo and yagé, really demand of you. But surrender to medicine or to life is actually a very conscious, active participation, which is funny because it seems like it might be the opposite. And I wonder what the path of surrender has been for you in this kind of search for vulnerability and connection.
I think you say that better than me. You should be the one being interviewed. I don't know if there's anything else I can add to that. I would say that you're definitely the expertise in that.
I don't know about that at all.
Not the authority, but for me, the surrender is something that's very hard to do because of the way I grew up. And showing any kind of emotion except for rage and anger was considered to be weak. And every time I cried, I was told, don't be a sissy, don't pull yourself together. So showing any kind of emotion, except for rage and anger, was weak. And so I learned to cut myself off from all these emotions because I didn't want to be weak. And being vulnerable was considered being weak. So that's something that's very hard for me to connect myself with, because it always feels like weakness to me. And to ask for help or any of those things is just weakness. And yesterday during the bufo ceremony, that was my intention. My intention before that had been to not fall down, to stay standing, to be completely conscious, and to not forget a single thing, because this experience is so incredible that I didn't want to miss any part of it. But yesterday I decided just to surrender and to let happen whatever happens. And I did end up forgetting, or I checked out, or I left my body. And I don't remember falling down or gently going to the ground, which is, I'm assuming that's how it happened. And then I remember coming back to my body and being in this incredible experience of being connected to myself and everything else, and being completely 100% in the moment and there. It's like all my energy, everything is focused on one point. It's not scattered anymore over here and this thing that I have to do tomorrow and this unfinished thing that I have to pay attention to, or all these other things and messages I have to return or whatnot. And then I just started to cry, and I just felt an incredible release. All these places where I did not let my emotions flow free and did not let my self-expression be uninhibited because I was afraid of getting cut off or getting judged, or all that like opened, and all that was able to be released. And I felt like all the people around me, the shaman and the other woman who works with this medicine, who were singing and who were there for me, and to just to receive that. Like, that's what I was practicing in that moment.
I feel like that comes back around to Taita Julio too, because his big thing is that the medicine is to sentir, is to feel. And that it seems like you're on a search to give yourself the permission again that feeling all of that you feel is okay and is in fact part of what you're here to do. I want to ask you about ego, because you had a revelation about that during ceremony this weekend that we spoke a bit about, and I'd love for you to share some of that.
So the ego is something that I'd never understood. When people talk about you have to kill your ego, you have to get rid of your ego, and that the ego is bad. When I don't understand something, I tend to search and search and search until I've discovered an answer for myself. And when I read about the ego, or I've had other people explain it to me, why you have to kill the ego and why you have to get rid of it and all these things, it never made sense to me. I couldn't connect it. I'd never felt right. Like, why would you want to kill your ego? It's like, it made absolutely no sense to me. So I kept thinking about it, and I had already had a little bit of a sense of this beforehand, that I'd realized that the ego is the part of ourselves that helps us survive. And in the ceremony, the last ceremony on Saturday night in Pachuca, that's when I really connected with it, and I really worked it through, that if the ego is a part of you, why would you want to kill it? Why would you want to kill any part of you? In Europe, we're taught to kill our emotions. And then, in spirituality, we're taught to kill our ego. In the tradition of meditation, we're taught to kill our thoughts. Like, don't think your thoughts, let go of your thoughts, this is bad. And maybe those are good practices to get into a certain other kind of space, but our emotions, our thoughts, our ego, they're only leading us down a road to show us something. And what the ego does, I realized, is when the ego rears its head, or when the ego becomes strong, or I don't know what, help me out with some words here.
You're killing it. You got it.
Whereas the Taita Google, as Taita Julio says about the Google, is the shaman Google. He is really funny. He makes a lot of jokes and has such joy and a great sense of humor. So where's the Taita Google and the synonyms when I need them? So when the ego becomes strong or expresses itself, it's not for us to kill it. It's actually for us to look at it and pay attention to it, because it's covering something up that it has to protect, because it's here to help us survive. So what is it? Survival is protection. The ego is like a shield that is protecting this place in ourselves that is either a weakness, a wound, or an insecurity. Because that is the most vulnerable when we are out in the world, when all the other assholes are out in the world coming at us, attacking us. So when we're not in a state of, kind of grace or this openness that I was in when, after all these ceremonies, we need the ego as a tool to protect ourselves in those tender places. So when we realize that that ego is helping us to protect those places where we don't feel so good about ourselves, or we have a wound, or we have a weakness, then we look behind the ego, we look behind that shield to that place that it's protecting. What is there? And once we heal that place, once we strengthen the insecurity, we heal that wound, then there's no more need for the ego to protect us, and the ego will just completely dissolve by itself automatically. So we don't need to kill the ego, we don't need to get rid of it or suppress it or anything. We need to heal the places where we're hurt, and the ego will dissolve because it's no longer needed.
And do you feel like these medicines are ways to do that healing?
I do. One of the threads that got a little bit lost a while ago when I was speaking about being in the ceremony, and something that really affects me, that's hard for me to really enter, is when people are screaming, or when people are really loud, and they're even one time I was jolted out of an experience where the ceremony had been completely silent, everybody was quiet, there was no music, and I, in a vision, went deep inside of this forest, and there was this man that met me there, and he was beautiful. But I realized he wasn't a man. He just had this beautiful physical body. But he was a spirit of the forest, like a guide. And I don't even believe in spirits or angels or God, or I don't believe in any of the hocus pocus. So I don't know how to make of these kinds of things when like beings sit themselves next to me and touch me and whatnot. But anyway, during the experience, that's what he was. And he led me into the forest, and he wanted to show me the most beautiful thing in the world, like the source, like the secret, the center of life, kind of. What do they say? The fountain of youth, something like that. And
Tesoro.
And yeah, el tesoro. And we were walking deeper and deeper into the forest, and then the music started, and it was boom, it was so jolting to me. It just ripped me out of that experience, and I was completely right here again. And that's what the same thing does when people are having a really hard time during the ceremonies and they're screaming. And I complained to Taita Julio about it, and I said, why can't you go do something? Why can't you, sing to them or pray to them or smudge them or do something so they're not screaming, they're okay, and I can have my peaceful, beautiful ceremonies and not be affected by all the locura, the craziness that's going on around me.
Because there are men like writhing around and yelling for, it felt like hours.
Hours sometimes, and saying like the worst kind of words. And sometimes like one time I was next to a man who just would not stop saying, puta, puta, puta madre, puta, puta. And that really did affect me. It just affected me because why are always the women who are being, the bad ones? They're always like, the swear words are always about the female body or the female sexuality, or there seems to be always more swear words for that. Like life's a bitch. Why can't life be a bastard? At least 50% of the time,
That's a fair point.
So anyway, he said to me, okay, I could go, I could do something, I could help them, and how would that serve them? They're in their process, and I would interrupt their process, and then they don't get to go through that and go through it and get out of it and release it. And then he said to me, and how would that serve you? Because sure, you might have a better experience in the ceremony, but when you go out into life and the assholes of life come along and they're attacking you, you're not going to have a taita on your side that can help protect you and pray over you and keep the assholes at bay. And he said, you need to learn how to just be in your experience without being affected by any of that. And then he said to me, and you need to learn tolerance. And that really jolted me. I was like, what do you mean, tolerance? I'm a very tolerant person. I'm not a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, or any of these kinds of things. I'm a very tolerant person. What do you mean? But then I kept thinking about it. Like, well, what does that mean to be tolerant? And I realized that tolerance isn't just like the large things like racism and sexism. Tolerance is all the tiny little things that annoy us about every single person that we meet, and every single, like the barking dogs and the screaming kids and the construction going on and all these things, tiny little things in life, or the waiter got my order wrong and, you know, the bus is late and now this is happening. Like all these kinds of little things in life, or the hippies in the festival that come to judge us. That's tolerance. And when we learn to not be affected by that, then we live our life freely, completely, and for ourselves without being reactionary to everything that's happening around us.
Do you feel like you've been learning tolerance?
I have, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, there's so many things I want to ask you, because there are things like you've done kambo, which is frog medicine, that I have questions about. But I guess since our time is running a little short, I'm curious where you see your journey going from here, because you've been on this very intense medicine journey now for about a year, and I'm wondering if you feel like you have more journeying to do, or if you're called by other medicines.
Yes, I definitely have more journeying to do, and I want to do it in a super intense, very fast way that probably everybody's going to judge me about. But what I have no longer time for is all the tonterías in my life, all the bullshit. I'm so done with it. Not that, like, I think that, I'm going to solve all these problems, and then I'm going to start living, and then it'll just be clear sailing from here on. It's not that I'm under some kind of delusion like that. There's always going to be something that happens in life. The onion constantly keeps peeling, but I just want to be free from all of this shit from the past that I've tried to free myself from, but somehow is still stuck somewhere. And I've tried to go to psychotherapy, and it's just something that does not work for me. I have to do it experimentally. I have to experience it, and I have to feel it in order to know it. And I think that in that sense, Taita Julio's way that tomar yagé no es para ver, es para sentir. It's not to see, but it's to feel, is not to have this vision. That really resonates with me and works for me, because when I feel it, I know it, it's inside of me. And I would love to do iboga, and that's kind of what's calling me next. Like a super intense, I feel like that's just gonna like completely break me or just tear me apart and free me. Like when it tears me apart, make openings for all those things that are stuck to just be released. But other than that, I don't really have a plan. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. And I think it's just going to come to me as it does. And I'll take the opportunities when they arise, when I meet people, when something is offered, when something becomes available. And other than that, I don't have a big plan. My really only big plan is to be free. I've wanted to be free my whole life. That's been my mission ever since a child, ever since I started to free myself from all the belief systems that were forced down my throat. And also then the belief systems that I've placed on myself, that I then believed myself. I can't give everybody else the blame outside of myself. I mean, like I said in my experience, that the true sadness is that I believed it, that I took on these belief systems that others tried to force onto me. Nobody really can force anything onto you, but you end up accepting it. You end up believing it. You end up internalizing it. And it's hard to not to when you're a child and all these authorities or your parents, all these people you depend upon are telling you. But now it's really just myself, and it's up to me to free myself from all these belief systems. And that's another thing that Taita Julio says in his ceremonies that I really resonate with. I don't know how to translate to English with the right words, but he says, no es para tener más conocimiento, es por un desconocimiento completamente, which more or less means that I looked up desconocimiento in the dictionary, and it means ignorance, but that's not how he means it. Conocimiento is knowledge. So it's not about adding or gaining more knowledge through these ceremonies, through these experiences. It's not about creating more belief systems and taking on more belief systems for yourself, but it's to completely free yourself in order that you can connect. There's no more like layers or shields or belief systems or anything over that true thing that we are, which you call it energy, life, whatever. This life that is beating inside of you that is you, where you're completely free.
So you can really see life for what it is.
For what it is. Yeah. And you're right there in the moment. And you're not going through life functioning based upon a formula. And you're not meeting people based upon a formula. With women, you interact like that. With men, like this or whatever. Where each person is a completely new and its own experience. And it has nothing to do with anything you've ever experienced in the past.
You have to have a deep trust in yourself in order to be able to surf life in that way, I think, to meet each moment with the confidence that you have everything you need in that moment to understand and to move forward.
Yeah, and in that way, it is important to have dissolved the ego. Maybe that's a better word for it, where the ego is kind of like that formula or that shield protecting you. And when you've dissolved that, when you no longer fear other people judging you or how they're going to react to you, or even any kind of pressure to be social, like, oh my God, what am I going to say? Like, am I going to be interesting, or how can I connect to this person? It's like either you connect or you don't. There's a connection or there isn't. And when there is a connection, there is no need to force conversation. The conversation flows freely and easily. It is without effort. And that's how you know there's a connection there. When it's an effort, when it's like forced and you try to explain yourself, then there is no connection. It doesn't flow freely.
And there's nothing that you're holding on to so hard that you have to protect from the world. Yeah, that resonates so much in the social anxiety that I experienced for a lot of my life that I feel like psychedelics have helped me release. It's exactly what you just said. It's like, so what, you know? It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, because it's all about you. It's about your experience. That's what Taita Julio says also during the ceremonies. This isn't about doing anything. This isn't about going anywhere. It's just about going inward. And it's just for you. It's for you to go inward. And your life is just for you. It's your life. Why would you have to fight for it? It's yours. It belongs to you. There is no need for you to fight for anything or do anything that you don't want to do, that is hard for you. If you don't like going to parties, don't go. If you don't like socializing, or socialize with the people that it's easy for you. It's fun. There's joy. The world and life is hard enough as it is, and people are going to always judge us, and life's going to throw us stumbling blocks or whatnot, and we're going to fall, and then we just get up and we go on. But why do it for yourself? Why put hardship in your own way when it's just about joy? Follow that and do what's joyful for you. Talk to the people that you enjoy talking to. Listen to the music that you enjoy listening to. Who cares if somebody else doesn't think it's cool? That's high school. But now we're all adults here, right? And so the choices is our own. And so the choice to take psychedelics or not should be our own. That should not be dictated to us by the authority, which is the government. Why is the government an authority over us to make laws and regulations and rules of what we can and can't do with our own body and the experiences we want to have?
Amen.
So let's change some of that laws also.
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing. I know you say that vulnerability and surrender is a big challenge for you, but everything I've seen in you in this time we've shared, you go so fearlessly toward the experiences that will blow you wide open. And I'm so grateful for all that you've shared with me and that you're sharing in this conversation for anyone who listens. So thank you.
Well, I realized there's only two kinds of fears in life. And fear is like the ego. It keeps you alive. So there's a fear that keeps you from living and a fear that keeps you from dying. And whenever you feel fear, look at yourself and question, like, what's this fear? Is this fear from keeping me from dying? Am I gonna, fall off the bridge? Am I gonna hit my head? Am I, whatever the fear is. Is this fear gonna keep me from dying, or is this fear keeping me from living? And when you figured that out and you realize that the fear is keeping you from living, then you overcome that fear. And people always say to me, oh, you're so courageous. You travel around by yourself in Mexico. And I'm not courageous. I'm not brave. Anything I do isn't brave or courageous. The only time that you're brave or courageous is when you overcome fear. That is brave and that's courageous. And that's what you have to do in life. You look at your fear, and when you realize your fear is keeping you from living, then you gather all the bravery and all the courage inside of you, and you overcome that fear so that you can truly live.
So when you say overcome, you mean do the thing that you're afraid of anyway? Yeah.
And there's no trick or formula to do that. It's just to jump right in and do it. And if you fall down, and then you get back up.
Well said.
And if a fall doesn't kill you, then you keep on gathering your courage for the next one and the next one.
Keep jumping. Yeah. Well, I've really loved jumping with you on this journey, and to many more adventures.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for joining us today. I encourage you all to look into tribal gathering if you're curious about those experiences. And you can, of course, feel free to reach out to me if you'd like some pointers on where to start in your research in this kind of journeying. I'm at maurajames.com and Maura James on Instagram. I also want to give a huge shout out to Takina Tantay, which is the music that you've been hearing on this episode. When Sondra took me down to Mexico, we stayed with Gia and Juan, who are the musicians, and they perform music for all of Tita Julio's ceremonies in Mexico. My previous experience in the medicine had been mostly in the Shipibo tradition, which does include music. The shamans sing these incredible icaros, or medicine songs. But the Colombian tradition that Tita Julio is coming from almost feels like a party. And the music that came out of these beautiful people who are also drinking the medicine as well is part of the healing experience. And most people, especially by the wee hours of the morning, were joining in and clearly knew the words to all the songs. And I got up and danced at a couple points, which felt so good. And we actually stayed with Gia and Juan, who are friends of Sondra's. They just opened their home to me unequivocally, which is a huge testament to Sondra and also to just the warmth of the community that I found there. It was my first time in Mexico, and I'm completely smitten. Even though I was the only person there that wasn't fluent in Spanish, and I was only catching probably 50% of what was happening literally and the rest just absorbing energetically, I felt so at home immediately, and everyone made an effort to connect with me in various ways. And actually, at the second ceremony that we sat at, Gia and Juan got married right before the ceremony, and they shared that with all of us who were there to journey with them. So that was a surprise and really extra special. But I definitely want to point you towards the Takina Tantay Soundcloud page. TAKINA TANTAY. There's so many beautiful gems there for you to float away on. I flew back to the States a couple weeks before Sondra did, and she called me with the following message that she had been thinking about since our conversation and wanted to share about her experiences with vegetarianism. And as always with Sondra, I love how she's so not interested in judging people or holding up a particular morality. And I think you'll find her perspective on this just as refreshing as I have in the context of conversations around how we eat that can become pretty ego-driven in some ways.
Hi, Maura. I forgot to say something during the vegetarian thing. When I was going through that experience in the garden, and I realized that life is life, and the important thing is not to focus on the taking of life, but the giving of life. Life sustains life. So it doesn't matter, be it a carrot or a cow, the important thing to focus on is the giving of life, is that carrot, that cow, whatever we take in of a body of another plant or animal into our body that gives us life. That's the beauty, that life sustains life. And that's a beautiful thing, not to be vegetarian or whatever other concept. That's it. And all life deserves to be treated with love and respect. So whether it's a carrot or a cow, the way you grow it, the way you treat it throughout its life, the way you take it, the way you eat it, the way you make it a part of your body, that deserves love and respect. That this other creature, this other plant gave its life for yours.
Be well out there, take care of each other, and we'll hang out again soon.